Teal here. Let's talk about this petition to ban social justice from universities that Sargon of Akkad has put up recently, since it seems to be the big thing that people want to talk about. This video is a condensed version of a livestream that I did, following up on a livestream that Sargon did with V. Monroe, Arch Warhammer, Kevin Logan, and the Woolly Bumblebee, in which I believe they completely missed the deeper points about this issue, and eventually descended into a shouting match, talking past each other about what amounts to, or what should be considered censorship or not. The current idea of this is to temporarily suspend social justice teaching in universities, and I assume lower levels of education as well, until such a time that they can be vetted for factual accuracy and their empirical vivacity checked, that their claims can then be amended and taught with the severe caveats that they need, rather than being espoused as though they are objective fact. For example, the 1 in 5 women will be raped figure, a figure that overzealously throws all women who have had sex while drunk or on drugs into the category of raped, even though most of them consented and do not believe that they were raped, many even going on to engage in further sexual relationships, or even marriages with their supposed rapers. The 77 cents to every $1 myth, the figure that has been repeatedly shown to be inaccurate, and the subsets that break down by race by the same criterion, that simply pits all those of one gender versus all those of another, ignoring any factor of hours worked, sick time, length of employment, overtime, demand for flexibility, and numerous other factors, and then positing this gap as the result of sexism, rather than simply as a result of a pattern emergence in people's average behaviors that varies from the male to female sex based on simple biological differences. Men with power, status, and money being the most desired by women, thus resulting in them working harder to achieve what women want, males facilitating female hypergamous desire. And then other concepts, such as the belief that all white people must necessarily be racist and that all cis people necessarily must be transphobic, owing to a never properly defined systemic bias, or systemic bigotry, that is supposedly inherent to the system that we live in. The teaching that the system we live in is objectively a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy rather than what it really is, simply an evolved mixed economic system with capitalist markets and varying degrees of socialist welfare programs, with no institute ever allowing for discrimination based on any factor of the people within, although we do of course see prejudice manifest in certain individuals. An individual does not a system make, and yet these are things taught as empirical truth in social justice. With all that out of the way, let's get into the meat of this. I can't help but think that this petition misses the fundamental core of the issue and aims to treat the symptom, not the disease. It's a nice starting point, but it's a band-aid solution that will not prevent this from happening again. I say this because academia has its flaws, as does everything in this world, and social justice as it stands is poised to take advantage of the flaw that is a feature of a pseudo-free market capitalist-driven education system, a similar system to the system of economics we currently use that allows for great freedom of trade, but with that freedom of trade necessarily comes the freedom of existence of things that people might find objectionable. This is not a bug of this system, it is a feature. The very feature that allows it to work so well is also its biggest flaw. In the current framework of higher education that we have, learning qualifications are not tools people are given access to in order to benefit themselves or society at large, which is what they hypothetically were originally for. This is part of the reason why higher education used to be free, or more accurately paid for entirely by the state. The hypothesis was what people would do with higher education: get a degree that assured them a job, and then they would contribute greatly to society because of that education. As a result of this burdensome system, higher education had a much more stringent entrance criteria than they do today. Courses were harder and fewer people graduated. What changed was a shift from the belief that higher education was for those who were worthy, from the best for the brightest, to the idea that higher education must be for everyone, and that everyone should be able to gain access to it, which resulted in a myriad of low-quality, low-qualification, low-entrance criteria courses springing up over the years. This, of course, leads to higher education no longer being funded by the state, that would later benefit from those higher caliber individuals, but instead to a system of loans that amounts to a mortgage on your life before you've even begun, for something that is fundamentally worthless. This is the commodification of education and coddling of the cotton wool-wrapped generation overseen by their helicopter parents that currently plagues higher learning and society at large. Universities will offer a degree course in anything as long as there is enough demand for such a course to exist, which is where we get the oft-cited internet joke of a degree in underwater basket weaving. If there was demand and a university could make a profit off of it, you can be damn well assured that they would offer it as a course. There is, of course, also the issue with the corruption of academia and the peer review process. With such a wealth of social justice-minded individuals, it is easy enough to pass the more insane rhetoric through the peer review process by virtue of simply knowing enough people of your own ideological bent, a problem demonstrated by the SoCal affair, where a physicist got published in a peer-reviewed academic journal a paper that basically amounted to saying gravity is a social construct, and backed this up with numerous insane postmodernist quotes and references. It was peer-reviewed and published despite its massive intentional flaws. It is this environment that has bred this rise in social justice. A generation of people told they can have anything, do anything, achieve anything, that they are special, that everyone loves them and supports them. They have never learned to fail. They have never been told no. Is it any wonder that when you should oppose their worldview, what do we see? Insult, baseless accusation, the pathetic tantrums of overgrown children throwing their toys out the pram wailing, "I hate you, you white, straight, male, racist, sexist, homophobe, transphobe, misogynist bigot. I can't be racist, sexist, or any of those things I've just accused you of," even though their entire tirade was just that and backed up with a line of logic that basically amounts to, because reasons. So the academic setting has been laid for social justice to rise. Mass numbers of people flooding higher education being lied to and told their watered-down pseudo-intellectual pursuits will be valued in society. They of course find out that is not the case, and then instead of realizing they picked the wrong path, they blame everyone else. Although people higher up in this system do, I believe, bear some blame in this, since it was them that enabled and pushed for this system to be in place. Ultimately, the responsibility ends with the user. And instead of the user, our shiny new sock-just advocate, realizing what they've done is not useful and can't get them anywhere, instead of changing paths, learning from their mistakes, they take what they have learned, that society is evil and out to get them, and everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything is homophobic, and they put that into practice and set to destroy the system that allowed them the freedom to education that they enjoyed. Removing social justice from universities will not fix this problem. Even a reform to social justice teachings will not solve this problem, because this is not a problem of education. This is a problem of society and the dysfunction of people. People in modern society are raised to be weak. Weakness is enabled in society. Everything caters to and appeals to the lowest common denominator. This is the base principle of social justice. Something that in itself is not inherently wrong. After all, it is the concept of social justice that makes building regulations have things such as lifts and ramps for wheelchair access, hearing aid tuning points at microphone booths in train stations and cinemas, the basic benevolent idea that people should not be restricted opportunity because of disadvantage. However, somewhere along the way, social justice mutated from this quite noble, and I think most people would agree, reasonable beginning point, into something that began positing other non-objective factors as disadvantages, using nothing more than pseudoscience and poor statistical data, which is why we now see social justice advocates in one breath declaring they want racial segregation to protect non-whites, in the next breath demanding social isolation to prevent so-called cultural appropriation, a laughable term that ignores the necessity of acculturation and the benefits of social assimilation, and yet in the next breath will say that they are not racist nor xenophobic. This all stems, I believe, from a unique mixture of factors. Weakness being promoted, people not being encouraged to better themselves, people not being encouraged to stand for themselves. We, quite rightly, help people who are in positions of disadvantage, in positions of need. It is one of the greatest virtues humans possess, the concept of altruism. However, we have now developed into pathological altruism. the idea that all people must always be helped. We have lost the concept that there is a point where intervention is no longer needed, and that people must eventually learn to walk on their own. The safety nets society provided are no longer safety nets to catch someone and spring them back up into the air to get back onto the rings, as it were. That springy safety net is now a soft feather mattress to catch, ensnare, and incentivize people to never leave its comforts. There are three major things people want in life: home, work, and family. It has been objectively shown people without stable accommodation, that is, people who must move frequently, people who live in substandard housing, crowded, cramped conditions, etc., have higher rates of stress, depression, alcohol, drug abuse, suicide, etc. It has also been objectively demonstrated that social isolation has similar outcomes. Children who are not interacted with, not touched, not cuddled, not played with, develop a fascinating condition known as socially induced dwarfism, a result of high stress and depression. The effects in adults, while not manifesting in their growth owing to their already developed state, takes a similar toll on the mind, resulting in the aforementioned substance abuse, high stress levels, depression, etc. And finally, people like to work. Some people might find that a strange statement, but it's true. People enjoy achieving things. They don't enjoy being underpaid wage slaves or struggling to find even the most mundane of jobs to keep their head above water, but people do generally enjoy some sort of pursuit, some more active than others, some more intellectually rigorous than others, but people feel fulfilled when they achieve things that they desire to achieve, whether that's hard manual labor creating building materials and houses, to the labor of a meticulously organized experiment in a lab, to beating a difficult boss fight in your favorite computer game. People like to achieve things. Once again, it is a well-known fact that constant strife with no reward, the dead-end job, the dead-end life with no greater prospects, leads to depression, stress, substance abuse, general misery. And yet, with all of these things being known, these are all things that are not incentivized in society. Housing is off the list of things to achieve in a generation affectionately known as Generation Rent, the current 18 to 30-somethings who either still live with their parents or live in rented accommodation because they have no hope of ever owning property, hence doomed to a life of burning their money to fill the pockets of others, as a generation who will live and die in a building they don't, and probably never could afford to own. Family is actively discouraged in society. Women are incentivized to divorce their husband at the first sign of strife and give in to hypergamous urges, knowing that there are always more fish in the sea and that possessing the highest demand social resource, the egg, gives them pretty much all the leverage in the human sexual marketplace. This is why we see women initiating between 50 and 75% of all divorces, some for valid reasons, others citing things such as sexual dissatisfaction. In other words, bailing at the first sign of not getting everything they want instead of communicating and fixing the problem. Another symptom of people raised to think they are special and entitled to the world. Leaving us in a society where men are increasingly less interested in the women that surround them, and owing to feminist actions and political pressure to get women into higher education, women are now seemingly less interested in the men around them, because basic hypergamous demand disincentivizes women from marrying below their own status, which is why we've seen a slew of articles coming out in the last few years about how women are outnumbering men in higher education, and it's men's duty to go and get degrees because those supposedly highly educated women are having a hard time finding husbands and boyfriends. In reality, there's more than enough men to go around. It's just that most men are under their radar because most women who have these pieces of paper from supposed higher education institutes refuse to date a man who doesn't have one or have one that's even better than their own. This results in the increasing failure rates of relationships and marriages and families that we see in society. Single motherhood is now the norm, and of course society bends over backwards to cater to the poor victims that are the women, resulting in women's massive disproportionate taking out of the welfare state compared to men who are doing the majority of paying in. It's often been joked about in certain circles of the internet, why bother marrying a man when you can just marry the state? All the money with none of the supposed problems. Well, no problems for the recipient of the welfare, but certainly a problem for the wider state of society. And finally, these two factors combine to kill people's desire to work. Men work and have always worked to the benefit of women. Humans are a hypergamous and gynocentric species. Men do things that women want. If women tomorrow all decided that the hottest thing ever was a guy in a tweed jacket, there wouldn't be enough cows to make the leather patches for the elbows of those tweed jackets, because every man would go out and buy themselves tweed jackets to satisfy the demands of women on the off chance that they will sleep with him. This is the impetus that kept society moving forward, and it's lacking in society now. Men have no reason to seek female attention, as female attentions are rapidly spiraling too high for most men to attain, owing to basic things such as most people not being cut out for higher education and the need for jobs and income. Men do not go to higher education because they would rather work and earn money. Lacking higher education instantly removes them from the position of being desirable to a lot of women, unless these men are in the top few percent of earners. This situation is then greatly exacerbated by the feminist political push to get more women into higher education, even though women currently outnumber men in higher education. Owing to a collapsing job market, because we live in a society that doesn't produce anything, it's purely consumerist now, there's simply not enough jobs to meet demand, owing partially to overpopulation, trapping people, mostly men, in the lowest of the low positions in society. Governments make jobs, but because of quotas and diversity, end up creating pointless middle management busybody jobs that end up mostly filled with women. This is a process set up to achieve only disaster. Society is sick and broken. The rise of social justice in universities is a symptom of this underlying sickness. To truly fix this problem and not just apply a band-aid solution of reformed social justice education, there needs to be a serious shift in attitude. Consider the following a list of potential fixes to this problem, a pseudo-election manifesto, if you will. 1. Stop electing weak officials who will not stand up as leaders to guide society forward, but merely continue pandering to the weakest people in a pathetic display of virtue signaling that might as well equate to the message of "we will never achieve anything ever." These leaders must always look inward to what is best for their citizenry. 2. Begin actually promoting strength of character. People want to better themselves and to achieve more than they do. People need realistic and achievable goals in life. This should be incentivized and supported. 3. People need and want somewhere to live. This must be provided because current landlords and private companies have no interest in doing so that they can keep their prices high and earn more money. 4. People need and want somewhere to work. This must be provided in a way that is sustainable and will work to the economic advantage of the nation, not just pointless busybody middle management. Restart and incentivize infrastructure work, home building, agriculture, and industry, and these problems can be solved in one fell swoop, providing homes for purchase, jobs to the willing and able, and capital to purchase those homes. Capital does not create jobs, jobs create capital. 5. Reduce welfare spending to all but those in genuine need. Welfare and benefits burden the economy, job creation stimulates the economy. Cease incentivizing and enabling divorce and single parenthood. The money saved will be better spent towards other infrastructural projects that will benefit all: education, healthcare, childcare, etc. 6. The state is a tool that must be used to benefit its citizenry and promote greatness within its citizenry, not promote weakness. 7. Stop perpetuating the noble savage myth and denigrating Western culture. Western cultures have a rich and varied history dating back centuries. The erosion of Western identities has left its people feeling isolated, dissolute, and with no sense of belonging. Is it then any surprise to anyone that we see Westerners reaching out to other civilizations for culture, only to be backhanded by the social justice PC police hiss of cultural appropriation? The rise in popularity of other cultural elements within the West is not inherently bad. Cultural exchange is inevitable, and attempting to isolate a culture is absurd. But this rise in other cultural elements is coming as a result of a dearth in Western culture. To give but some simple examples, how many people do you know who possess some sort of Middle Eastern or tribal, religious or cultural symbol in their house? A Buddha figure, some ancient Egyptian symbol, some tribal piece of artwork from South America, etc. Now how many people do you know who possess something similar from European culture? A hammer of Thor, a horseshoe above their door to ward off fairies or trolls, for instance. Probably very few, and those few who do possess such things will no doubt be labelled as some sort of white supremacist. Begin teaching European people about their own culture so that they have a firm sense of identity and their own history. Culture is the glue of society. It cannot exist in a vacuum, but nor can it be ignored, and it cannot especially be ignored and then people be chastised for seeking some sort of culture from elsewhere. A society with no culture is like a boat without a rudder. There is no shame in knowing the history and traditions of the land you are born in. Historical knowledge does not equate instantly to perpetuating nor practicing. This does not affect or remove the right of anyone to practice their own beliefs alongside this promotion. 8. None of the above are in any way limited to any race, ethnicity, sex, or gender. Cultural unilateralism is the name of the game. If you're on board with these principles, you're welcome. I feel that this is a good place to end. I could flesh this out further if anyone is interested, but I can't wait for all the libertarian, voluntarists, anarchists to come out and begin shouting about how I have endorsed and excused the state, even though I desire massive reform to it, and how they think that some sort of state must be inherently wrong, which is a laughable position. It can be, certainly, but not always nor inherently. As I said, it should be a tool, not a separate entity that works against the interest of its citizens. So in closing, to pull us back to the original point, temporary suspending social justice in universities. It's a start, but it's only a temporary solution to a much deeper problem in society that is currently going unaddressed in the mainstream. Why do I now get a feeling that the majority of the comments around this aren't going to be about the concept of social justice in universities, but are now going to basically turn into statists and anti-statists? Let's see how accurate that prediction turns out to be.